Hi everyone, I'm Tina Moore. I'm the Family Connections Manager, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our Live a Skillful Life series for the Family Connections Alumni Institute. We are kicking it off today with a fantastic presenter, Marie-Paule de Valdivia, and she is going to be presenting the skill of wise mind. And so just a little bit about Marie-Paule is she had worked in marketing for 2 decades before experiencing mental health challenges within her own family. And after learning about borderline personality disorder, she joined the NEA BPD board in 2010. And are you ready for this? Over the next decade, she helped grow the Family Connections program from serving a couple hundred families a year to supporting over 3,000 families in over 20 countries. We are so fortunate to have her with us. She became a Family Connections leader and then went back to school and got her master's of social work and is now a DBT therapist in private practice. And she helps families and patients and coaching them on DBT-based family skills. So we are so glad you are here to join us, Marie-Paule, and I'm going to have you take it away.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I really want to thank you for joining this talk on Wise Mind. I've often conceptualized Wise Mind as the end goal of DBT. We will talk about our own wise mind, which is really our wisdom, what it really is, how to get in touch with it. But where mindfulness is so much a central building block of DBT that it is actually called core mindfulness, wise mind is sort of the end result. Marshall Linehan calls it the organizing principle of DBT. So it is my hope that by discussing this today, you all will get a sense, a solid sense of this skill that I personally find perhaps most helpful of all. Learn it, be encouraged to practice it, and in doing so, model it and encourage it to use perhaps for people who struggle a great deal in your lives. So I am going to share my screen and, oh, look at that. I will need to sort of go back to, okay, so hold on. Okay, just one quick second, if you would. There we go. Let me try this again. I am going to try to share my screen. There we are. And as soon as this thing on the bottom goes away, then I will be able to do a full screen. But for now, to not waste time, I'll just stay there. So I have been reflecting on Wise Mind for a while now. And I have really inspired myself from some people who have thought about it, written about it, and helped this process along. And of course, Alan Frizzetti and Perry Hoffman in the Family Connections teaching notes, as well as Marshall Linehan in the DBT Skills Manual in particular. Karen Hall, who has been a long time board member at NEA BPD, has given me a lot to think about Wise Mind. Cedar Coons, who is a DBT practitioner, has written a great book called The Mindfulness Solution for Intense Emotions, and she talks quite a bit about wisdom in there. A French philosopher who reflects on values and emotions and their impact on lives. His name is André Comte-Sponville. I don't expect you to read his books. And then most importantly, perhaps all the clients and families I have been working with. So yeah, many thanks to all of them. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to start with a mindfulness practice because after all, we are in the world of DBT. Then we'll give a few definitions about the various states of mind and we'll define them and we'll learn how to recognize them and manage them. And then we will bridge the gap from these state of minds to wise mind. And we will talk about implementing wise mind, which is what I hope we will spend a bit of time on. And then we'll talk about modeling and encouraging wise mind. And I was telling Tina earlier, I'm not really sure how long all of that will take, but if we have time, I will be absolutely delighted to take questions. All right, so let's start with the mindfulness practice. I would like to ask you to bring your mind to a time when you might have acted in a way that made sense in the moment, but that you later came to regret. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be something really simple, perhaps having decided to make something for dinner that you then thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Or maybe you made a bigger meal that needed to be made, or perhaps you pushed a responsibility or a task back, procrastinated, or said something you wish you hadn't, or so something. It doesn't have to be to be something disastrous, just something where you acted in a way and it made sense in that moment, but then you thought, I wish I hadn't done that. So I'm going to give us 3 minutes, as we tend to do in mindfulness practice, and I'm going to ask you to reflect on the questions that are below. What was challenging about the situation in that moment to you? What did you want to do? What were you pulled to do, right? What did you think you should do, which might have been the same thing and might have been different? And why was that? And if you were unsure of yourself, what do you think made you decide the way you did? So the things in the orange box to the right are little prompters that might help you answer these questions. Maybe you need no prompters. Maybe you're absolutely fine. But as you're reflecting on those questions, you might look to the right and sort of wonder whether perhaps judgments came up and were part of what was challenging about this situation, or lack of self-confidence, or not enough knowledge, or those kinds of things. Okay, so I wish I could ask you all if it's clear. I hope it is. We will take 3 minutes to do this activity. I'm going to ring my singing bowl one time to start, and then I will ring it one time to end in 3 minutes. Thank you for participating in this mindfulness activity. Perhaps the example that came to mind will come back to your mind as we go through this presentation. So, I need this thing to move. In DBT, we hold dear the concept of 3 states of mind: rational mind, emotion mind, and wise mind. The states of mind are often what characterizes short-term versus long-term decision-making. So we decide in the moment. We might call this on impulse. Oftentimes, this is something we want when we decide in the moment. It's something we really want. Or conversely, we might overthink something. Somehow, we either act too fast or not at all. So I'm going to raise the stakes a little bit here. If we think about all the decisions we make, which of course are influenced by our emotion mind and our rational mind, and hopefully by our wise mind, if we think about all these decisions that we make and we add them all up, they start to look a lot like who we are, right? Even though, I'm not sure why this, oh, there we go. Even though we don't always like all of our choices, right? So when we think about who we are and this amazing ability that we have to make space in our brain to think about how do we know who we are, right? Can we take a step back in our exploration of wisdom? And I would propose to you, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some things, that the bedrock of who we are is values, right? We're born with some values and we acquire others as we go through life. Values are inherently ours. We create our set of values. Most values are considered good, right? It's a judgment. But if I say to you all courage, or if I say compassion, right? We're all nodding, going, yeah, that's a good value. Honesty is a good value. Generosity, right? Those are values. And we all tend to have 1 or 2 core values that really resonate really deeply. And they're not always the same as the values we would like to have. So for instance, I think very, very highly of the value of honesty, which is why I married a guy who is incredibly truthful and incredibly honest. Don't ask him if you've gained weight, because you will get a true answer. I will get interrupted in conversations if I don't say something that he thinks is absolutely true and to the point. I think highly of honesty, and you know, I'm not beyond little white lies. I care about being truthful, but you know, little white lies, my value is how people feel. My value is social justice. My value is equity. This is what is in my bones. This is what makes my blood boil. Think about what your values are. If you know what your values are, that will be the bedrock of who you are. And then to that, we can add goals. Now, goals are a little bit more subjected to our environment, right, where we are, the stage of life we're in. Our goals might change when we're in college and when we're halfway through our lives. Conditions like our health, our education, perhaps our religious background or our ethnic background will affect our goals or will shape our goals. Goals don't change continuously. They're long-term, but we need some stability in our lives to get to goals, right? Beyond goals, we have all our past experiences and observations from our life, right? They're a very important element of choice making. When we make a choice, we know we can build on experiences we've had. We're shaped by those experiences, whether positive, reinforced by those positive experiences, or negative, sometimes even trauma, right? That will shape us profoundly. Some of it is what happens to us. Mental ill health is one of those things. Some of it can be also the result of our actions. And then we're going to add to those past experiences what we feel on an ongoing basis, all our emotions. Our reasoning looks a lot likewise like what our topic for today, right? Wise mind, emotions, reasoning, and our choice of action based on all of this, right? So choice of action comes, but is built on a lot of, on a solid level of layers of choice points, if you will. So here's our hint number one. We can tell that our actions are unhelpful when we notice repetitive patterns of ineffective outcomes, right? We act here. I hope you guys can see my mouse. We act here and we make choices of actions many, many times every day. And if those actions are repeatedly unhelpful, well, then there's probably something here or below that is that we need to look at, that we need to explore. And we see this with our loved ones, don't we? So I'll give you a quick example on here. My daughter, whose name is Camille, who has given me permission to give those examples, struggles a great deal with her oral health. This is not a values problem, and it's certainly not a goals problem. She has a good job. She would like to keep her job. She's very clear that it's easier to have and keep a job when your teeth are healthy and you're not losing your teeth. But her past experiences are that any shot in her mouth is incredibly painful. We talk about people who have borderline as being extremely sensitive. Well, she tells me that she feels the shot go, she feels the needle touching her bone, in her mouth. And that would be horrible. If that is really what she's feeling, that would be absolutely horrible. So, of course, the emotions go up, fear being the main one of them. Reasoning sort of goes out the window. Choice of action is often not showing up, even though we have an appointment, and that creates a problem. So I'll be using this example again, but that's a little bit of an example on how our choice of action can be shaped by anything that happens before that. So how do we make choices over time? Emotional response, rational response. If the emotional response is little because the prompting event happened, but we're holding it in and we're sort of white knuckling it, we're not paying attention to feelings and needs. This is what happens to her when she makes an appointment for the next dental care visit. She's not thinking about how it will feel, so she might make the appointment at a time of day that is not so practical, at the end of a work day. She's not being super careful about her feelings and her needs. Rationally, she knows that she needs this appointment. She's very task-oriented. The outcome sucks, right? She'll cancel the appointment frequently. Conversely, when she receives the appointment reminder, there's going to be a very strong emotional response. The emotional response will include a lot of impulsivity, which is sort of avoiding going, and a lot of negative self-judgments, especially when the consequences of not having good oral health show up. Her rational response is basically non-existent at that time. She just received the reminder for the appointment. She wants to hear nothing about this. And so there is very low problem solving. The outcome is also very imbalanced. Yeah, and there are solutions, and we have found the solutions. But here's a perfect example of how you're not getting to solutions at all when you're all focused on the emotional response or all focused on the rational response. Okay. So before we talk about the intricacies, and I'm going to get into this chart, but before we get into the intricacies of this chart, I would like to simply summarize. Reaching what we've said so far, reaching our long-term goals is dependent on our ability to know ourselves, including values, goals, etc., and to act accordingly. This webinar is for us to get better at that. And you do see, I hope, how hard it is for our loved ones who struggle, right? This balancing act we all have to do. They have to do too. But without skills, they are continually yanked away from their long-term goals by their emotions and short-term wants, the need, the immediate need. So no wonder things are so hard for them. So let's talk a little bit about those states of mind that are so important in DBT. So emotion mind, let's take an example. Oftentimes, emotion mind comes along when we really want something. Wanting something is very activating. And so it's a very powerful, it evokes emotion mind very powerfully, right? Wanting something. So a couple of years ago, well, a year and a half ago, I lightened my calendar a great deal because I had some family issues, some family health issues with my parents, and I also had some medical issues. So it made perfect sense to lighten my calendar. And then the pandemic hit. And during the pandemic, you know how everybody got a dog, right? And a dog absolutely does not lighten anybody's load, but a dog was on my mind. And I have a very good friend who walks dogs. And so I went for walks with my friend Anna, who walks dogs. And I was probably not super alert to my emotion mind-driven behaviors. So what happened to me? I was in emotion mind. Anytime I thought about a dog, I didn't even know what dog, but anytime I thought about a dog, I literally could feel the fur of the dog on my hands. It felt so urgent. I mean, poor dogs. Dogs needed places to be. I could not take my mind off of having a dog. I really wanted us to have a dog. My husband also wanted a dog. There were no alternative options. It was all emotion focused. A cat was an alternative option, but my husband is allergic to cats, so that wouldn't work. It was really hard for me to imagine anything else in those moments. I was ruled by my mood, by my feelings, by my made up physical sensations, by my urge to get a dog, to have a dog come live with us. Facts, reason, logic, out the window. I was pushing aside all my misgivings, including a pretty big one, which was that my family, my parents who need my help live in France. And I go to France 4 or 5 weeks at a time to help out. And so having a dog is not the most practical thing in those conditions, but you know, my mind was on all the immediate rewards. Emotion mind is characterized by loud. It's really loud in your brain. It speaks strongly, right? It's not always the same every day, but it's very loud. So let me introduce to you Sophie, who arrived in March of this year. And you know, what the heck? What the heck? She's a great dog, but how do you know that you're stuck in wise mind? Well, you know you're stuck in one wise mind when you overgeneralize. Statements like, it's going to be great, it's going to be wonderful, dogs are fabulous. When you filter information, when you forget the fact that you're going to need to find a trainer and you're going to need to find a place to board the dog. And, you know, none of this was really in my mind. When the arguments feel so imperative, you have to do this, right? And you don't want to listen to anybody else tell you otherwise. Your emotions are the truth. That's it. They tell you the truth. You have this thought, of course, that your emotions are telling you the truth. When you're fortune telling, it'll be fantastic. It'll be great. It was not fantastic. It was not great for the first couple of months. It's now wonderful, but it wasn't at first. I did not catastrophize, but I did minimize the outcomes. And I did think in terms of black and white. You know, we will figure it out. A dog is not easy, but we will figure it out, which is also part of the control fallacy. We'll do it. It'll work out. Okay. So that's how you know you're stuck in wise mind. If that happens to you that you're stuck in emotion mind. If that happens to you, if you physically feel hot and the words are loud and you feel pressure, you also don't want to listen to anybody's advice, then you're probably sort of stuck in wise mind. So what do you do? When you're stuck in wise mind, it makes a lot of sense to try to counter your emotion mind. I keep doing this. When you're stuck in emotion mind, it makes a lot of sense to try to counter your emotion mind with some skills, because it is going to decrease your emotional reactivity. You're going to be able to manage emotions more. You're going to be able to trust your internal experience. You're not going to later go back and say, what was I thinking? Sometimes repeatedly. You're going to be able to solve, to increase your problem solving skills range. It'll give you a sense of who you are, and you will feel better about it. So how do we do it? Well, we can name and validate the emotion. If we name the emotion excitement, and we validate the emotion, which is called self-validation, right? Of course, I'm excited. Of course, I want a dog. Everybody's wanting a dog right now. We're in a pandemic. We need something to do. We want to have pets at home for some reason. And it makes perfect sense that I want a dog. I haven't had a dog in 3 years. We're pet people. It makes sense. List the facts and check the facts. That in writing, that is going to bring emotion mind down, right? And then, since you're checking the facts, do a pros and cons. You know, what are the pros of getting a dog? What are the cons of getting a dog? What are the pros of not getting a dog? And what are the cons of not getting a dog? Think about it, slow it down. Ask a trustworthy friend. Going for a walk with my great friend Anna, who adores dogs, was probably not helpful to me, because even though I still adore her, because she's not objective. You know, she kept telling me how great it would be if I had a dog. And so be sure that when you ask somebody, that person be trustworthy or objective about it. And then ride the wave, sleep on it. For me, sleeping on it wasn't really that helpful because pandemic was still going on. So it was really an everyday sort of desire that I was going for. But for me, a key point was the fact that I did not ask a friend I know who would have been very trustworthy and would have helped me select maybe a different breed or a different size, or I didn't ask her. And, you know, she probably would have guided me quite differently. So there's a sign of emotion mind. Self-validation. You have feelings. You have every right to have feelings. You have thoughts. Your thoughts bring you to behaviors. Acknowledge them, accept them. They are valid. They are understandable. They're not always aligned with your goals, but they're understandable and valid. And just the act of self-validation will bring down the emotionality of emotion mind. Try to find what is relevant and what is true and what is effective, if anything, in your response. Okay, remember what Alan says, do not validate the invalid at all, but whatever is valid, feel free to validate, confirm and strengthen it, regardless of whether it's a thought, an emotion, a physical sensation, or an action. All right, so those are the tips to self-validate. Naming the emotion will bring down the emotion. Self-validating will bring down the emotion. So that's the little sort of sentence to self-validate. Given the fact that we are all stuck at home right now, and that going out for walks with a dog feels like travel, it would be great to do. It makes sense that I really, really, really wanted a dog. Okay, and that is true. That is a true fact. Let's move to rational mind. Rational mind is cool. It's non-urgent, right? So where is my example of rational mind? There. I want to give you an example to sort of shape what rational mind is. So I'm going to go back to my daughter. And I told you she has a job. She likes her job. She's excellent at her job. And she manages the office of a bank, of a large bank in the town that we live in. And one of her colleagues had left, and her boss asked her to cover the colleague who was on vacation. So now she had 2 jobs to do, and it was too much. She would come home at 11 every night, and she was upset, basically pissed off. She felt that she wasn't doing anything that she needed to do well. Some pretty important tasks were on her shoulders, and she was afraid of messing up. So she was not in a good place at all. And what she did was she shut down the emotions. The whole, I'm upset, I'm afraid, this is too much. She just put it in a box. She would let it out when she came home, but when she was at work, she wasn't doing that at all. She was thinking that she needed to act extremely professionally, so she was cool about it. She was not letting the urgency of the situation bother her. She remained task focused, just like a GPS, just like a recipe. You know, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, step by step by step. Facts, reason, logic. All right. She was pushing aside her feelings completely. She wasn't making a fuss, and she pretended that she felt fine. When she came home, of course, as parents, we validated, and then we offered some problem solving. And we said, you know, how about you make a list of all the tasks that you're supposed to do, and then show them to your boss and ask him to help you prioritize. And she said, I can't do that. And we said, why not? And she said, because if I open my mouth, then I will, and I'm cleaning up the language, I will have to tell him to just F off. I can't talk to him right now. I am just too upset. So you see how she was just putting the emotions into a box, locking the box. How long could that have lasted? It lasted a week, time for her colleague to come back from vacation. So that was a good thing. But we all know this doesn't last very long, does it? So she was all rational mind. That was her solution. It's complete white knuckling. It worked for that time, but it couldn't have lasted very long. It would eventually have created further problems. Okay. So where emotion mind is really loud, the voice is really loud, rational mind has a tone that is condescendent. Of course, I'm going to do my job. Of course, I'm not going to ask my boss for help. No, that would make no sense at all. It's very pros and cons, very pragmatic, very structured, right? Of course, we're going to follow the GPS. Of course, we're going to follow the recipe step by step. It's sort of that quality of mind process. So how do you know that you're stuck in rational mind? Well, you might be ignoring your intuition. My daughter certainly was. People who care tell you they don't get it, like we did. We said, what are you doing? Don't do that. Don't do that. It makes sense, and don't do that. The decision certainly felt flat and dry. It was this one thing that she was going to do. You might know you're stuck in rational mind when you're ignoring your needs to the benefit of others, pushing past any sort of signals from your body, pushing past feelings, or even feeling clueless in face of the feelings of others. Those are all little sort of signs that you might be stuck in rational mind. So how do you manage that? Sort of like a puzzle, right? You find the emotion. You ask yourself what the emotion is, and you name the emotion. Right? So, of course, my daughter didn't want to do that. She wanted to keep it boxed up. But what was the emotion? What were the thoughts? Right? She was upset. She was frustrated. And we know that frustration is the family of anger. Anger is a secondary emotion. What she would have needed to do is say to herself, what is fueling my anger? What is it that's fueling my frustration? Right? And she would probably, knowing her, I'm guessing, she would have found out that it was fear of not doing a good job, fear of not meeting requirements. So get a clue from your thoughts when you're stuck in rational mind. Ask yourself, what am I thinking? And then get a clue from your physical sensations, which often are assigned to your emotions, right? So this tells you something. Tearing up tells you something. Tensing your shoulders tells you something. a big weight on your chest tells you something. That tells you what the emotion might be. And then right away, instead of shutting down the emotion as if you were not allowed to have an emotion, self-validate, validate the emotion. Remember, the emotion makes sense. So when you're stuck in rational mind, try to bring in some of the emotion mind and validate it so that it becomes easier and easier as you go. So I've said a lot about emotion mind. I've said a lot about rational mind. This is what Marsha Linehan says about wise mind. She says it's like having a heart. Everyone has one, whether they experience it or not. And you can work the muscle of wise mind. Your wise mind can be something that you evoke more often. And like every other skill, parenting skill or DBT skill, you want to try on a nice weather day. You want to try when you know what you're doing. When the road leads you to emotion mind, or the road leads you to rational mind, or the road leads you to a little bit of both, take the time to detour to wise mind. Check in with yourself, check in with your wise mind. The more you cultivate this wise mind experience, the easier it will come in more difficult moments. The easier it will be for you to model it for your loved ones, or to ask a question here or there to help elicit wise mind for your loved ones. So what is wise mind? Well, everything that is written in emotion mind and rational mind is still the same. Wise mind actually honors both. It is not a mix of both necessarily. It is not even a synthesis of both. It is not the middle path necessarily. It is a middle path. It is not the middle path. It reflects your inner wisdom. Remember the chart with the bedrock? It incorporates your values. It incorporates your goals and your past experiences. It integrates all of this so that you can see that each person will have their own wise mind answer, even if there was a situation where emotion mind and rational mind told two people the exact same thing. Each of these two people would most likely land in a different wise mind place because their values are different and their past experiences are different. Intuition is not wise mind. Intuition is part of wise mind. Some people have very strong intuition and they can rely on it. They've learned to rely on it. Other people's intuition is not that solid, and yet it's still there. And so that also is part of the aspect of wise mind. So I would like to give you a personal example of the time that I think wise mind has been the most effective and helpful for me. And it's actually a long time ago. This is after I had taken my first family connections class. And I think it was after I had trained to become a family connections leader, but I had not started to teach family connections yet. So it was a long time ago. And I understood the concept of wise mind, and I was also really finding it very, very difficult to live with our daughter, who struggles with addiction, and the repetitive nature of the relapses was just really heavy and exhausting. And I sat down at my desk one time, and writing things out for me has always been helpful. And I started to write, and I wrote, not necessarily in any order, things that related to rational mind and things that related to emotion mind. And when I looked back at it a long time after, I noticed that what was in the emotion mind section was how much I absolutely, absolutely love her, how profound that love, profound and grounded and solid bedrock, right, that love is, and how difficult she was, and how frustrating the whole thing was, and how tired I was, and how unfair this whole thing felt. And that I often had the thought that there was no progress at all. And sometimes I would want to run away from the whole problem. And then I would get super hyper focused, like I had to fix it all. And sometimes I would ruminate and ruminate and ruminate. All of this in the face of no change. And it was just exhausting. And in everything that I wrote, there were a lot of rational mind thoughts as well. The fact that she needs support, she is a human being who needs support, and that none of this is her fault, and that she works at trying to fix it, but none of it is her fault. That family support, I know this, even when I don't feel it in the moment, family support, connectedness with one another in our family is a central value to me and to our family, actually. And that she brings so much. She's full of amazing qualities, and she brings them, and she brings so much to our family. And so there was a list there of her qualities, her generosity, her kindness, her humility, her desire to make efforts. Rational mind told me that there is progress. It's glacial, it's so slow, but there is progress. And it also told me that I should have written we, my husband and I, can bring her stability. We, my son, my husband and I, the family can bring her stability. And she has all these qualities that can help her move forward, right? So all of this was written in order to try to elicit wise mind. And it took me a while to get to it, and I will share with you what it is. But I found myself very aware of how vulnerable I was, right? And that's sort of how you know you're getting to wise mind. You want to be skillful, and it's hard. You know that there are emotions, but you can watch them come and watch them go, and you're not acting on them. And you know this thing about emotions? They come, they go, and then they come back. And then they go again, and then they come back. But you're not acting on them. You remember feeling this way in the past and having acted on it in ways that maybe were not the most effective. You're prepared to ask for help, the right people. And you're remembering your long-term goals. Those are signs that you might be in wise mind. So how do we get to wise mind? This deck will be shared with you at the end of the presentation, this slide deck, and I will also attach to that. This is out of Marshall Inahan's skills training manual, the various mindfulness practices that she recommends to get to wise mind. But what Marcia says is that finding wise mind is like riding a bike. You can only learn it by experience. And we know this, that we can only learn it by experiencing it in easy moments at first. This is perhaps silly, which is a judgment, but practice wise mind to decide what you're going to make for dinner. Practice wise mind to decide what you're going to do next weekend. Ask yourself, what does my wise mind tell me about what I should do next Sunday? Right? And start to think about your emotion mind. What does your emotion mind say? And what does your rational mind say? Marcia says, keep your eyes open, but find a good place to rest your eyes. So try not to look elsewhere. Try to stay grounded. Eyes open, because as Marcia also says, we live our life with our eyes open. So keep your eyes open, but put a place to rest them. And start thinking about what your wise mind is telling you about something very easy. And then do it again, and then do it again. Right? Practice on easy things. You will be able to practice all of these once you get the list of mindfulness practices that help you get to wise mind. I'm going to speak of the other three that I find super, super helpful as well. So of those that Marshall Inahan recommends, I love walking down the inner spiral stairs. So this involves thinking about your emotions, listing your emotions, much like I did about my daughter, and then listing your rational thoughts, and doing this as you're walking down and down and down and down. Imagine arriving at the bedrock. And then come back up, thinking that when you come out, your wise mind will speak to you. Right? So don't push the wise mind. Don't go after it. Allow it to come. Okay? Seeing the answer appear on a sheet of paper is a practice that my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Seth Axelrod, often uses. Same thing, look at your emotion mind list, look at your rational mind list. Breathe, and then let it all get out of your mind and imagine, visualize a white piece of paper. And wait until the answer appears on the piece of paper. It feels a little Ouija boardy thingy like, but you know what? It's so effective. It is so effective. Wise mind is rarely, yes, you should do this, or no, you shouldn't do that. Wise mind is very often, in these conditions, you might want to consider this. Or perhaps consider this before deciding, right? Wise mind is pretty sophisticated, and it will guide you. Pros and cons, the DBT way, which is the pros of, so to go back to the example I gave, the pros of continuing to support my daughter, the cons of continuing to support my daughter, the pros of not supporting my daughter, the cons of not supporting my daughter. Okay, so it's all four. It's really thinking through pros and cons of the thing, the problem, and pros and cons of not engaging or not solving the problem. And then writing it out. So writing it out to me has been really, really helpful. When I wrote this whole thing out, the place I got to was, took me a while, but the place I got to, maybe I should go back. I don't know if I can actually. Yeah, I can. Okay, there we are. So these were my emotion mind thoughts, and these were my rational mind thoughts. My wise mind told me that I had made a promise to this child. And this promise was that I would be with her always. As her mom, I would be with her always. That promise was made when she joined our family. And as a result, I would always be there for her, and I would be her best friend when she was her own friend. And when she was not her best friend, for example, when she relapsed, well, then I would continue being her best friend, which of course involved standing against her behaviors. This, so maybe I didn't say it quite right, I'll just repeat it really quickly. So I promised to be her best friend always, which means supporting her when she made good decisions, and which also meant standing against her ineffective decisions, because that's what best friends do. This has guided my path. I did this, as I said, maybe 6 months, 8 months after learning of family connections. This has been my guiding path, my guiding light always. In moments that I call moments of hurricanes, when things have gotten really hard, really bad, I have always come back to this wise mind. And it sounds great. It took me a while to get there. It's mine. It's my wise mind because it's based on my values. It doesn't mean it's right for anyone else, even though it might be, but it doesn't mean that it is, right? That is the power of wise mind. When you are clear about your wise mind, you can look at it and know that it is the right thing for you. The beauty of wise mind, which is sort of like a PS, but the beauty of wise mind is that, hey, sometimes wise mind tells you wrong. You know, it's based on your emotions, your rational mind, and what you know. And we can be a year later, 5 years later, and say, in hindsight, I would not have done this. But you're still so solidly grounded because you could not have chosen anything else. It had to be your wise mind at that time based on what you knew. So what you do is you take care of any regrets that way. There is no regret to be had. It was a wise mind decision, given what you knew then, right? It was the best possible decision you could have made, okay? So when you're in wise mind, you feel grounded day after day. You know you're solidly in wise mind when you're no longer attached to the outcomes. You know, this sensation of, oh, but I really want this other thing. I really would prefer for my daughter to never relapse. She's doing actually really well, but I would prefer to be sure that she would never relapse. I'm not. It doesn't matter. It's, you know, I'm not attached to that outcome. Acceptance of what is comes so much easier. There is no need for others to agree. This is me. I'm solid. There are no self-judgments. And you are aligned with your own values and your long-term goals. And it is so solidly connected with knowing yourself. Right? So that's the beauty of wise mind. So I'm hoping that this presentation is encouraging you to do that work. It doesn't come easy. You have to practice it. Practice with little things and then with bigger things. But my encouragement to you is to stay connected with your own wisdom. Be mindful. Mindfulness is core mindfulness. Be curious. Be curious about your thought processes, about what goes on, about your own values. Ask yourself, you know, what do I stand for? What is important to me? What is it that gets me really sort of riled up? What is important to me, right? And stay connected with that. And before I thank you for all you do, try to model wise mind. And so the way to model wise mind is, of course, to do it, but to also verbalize it. You certainly can say to yourself, well, you know, my wise mind is telling me to not have meat for dinner tonight. It sounds silly. You're modeling wise mind. You can say words like, in my wisdom, I think the sky is a little too gray to go out for a hike this afternoon. Right? You're modeling wise mind when you verbalize it, and you can even verbalize the pros and cons, or the emotion mind. I really wish we could go for a walk this afternoon. I'd really been looking forward to it. And I'm looking at the weather report, and it says it's going to rain, and it also says that it's going to get really cold. And I don't want to get sick because I have an important activity tomorrow, right? This is all rational mind. So now you're verbalizing emotion mind, rational mind, and you can verbalize wise mind. Maybe we can push the hike to tomorrow or next week, right? So the more you practice wise mind, the easier it will come. The more it comes, the more you can verbalize it, the more you can model it. And when you're really comfortable with it, you can even ask questions such as, well, what do you feel like? And what are your thoughts? And what does your wisdom say about this? Right? So that is my encouragement to you. I hope this has been helpful. Again, thank you for all the classes you teach, for all you do. You make such a difference for so many people. And I have my email address down here in case you have any questions, but we have like, I think 7 or 8 minutes for questions.
We do. So if you would like to send a question in the Q&A, you can do that. We did have one question about modeling. So, you know, many of us have loved ones with BPD that are not in treatment. So what would you do first to model wise mind and in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tina. I would validate. I would not go towards wise mind at first. I would just simply validate, because when somebody is elevated, somebody is annoyed, somebody is frustrated, somebody is pissed off, you can't do anything in that moment. You really need to sort of be in an even state of mind in order to even have a chance to experience wise mind. The good news is you can validate and start to explore emotion mind a little bit, right? So I am seeing that you're very, very upset right now is validating. And it's also labeling one of the things that is an emotion mind. What else are you feeling? Why are you so upset? So you can start to explore emotion mind a little bit. Many people tell me, many of the families I work with tell me that when they start doing this, their loved ones say to them, hey, you're not my therapist. It's fair. It's totally fair. So you have to sort of navigate this fine line of doing it from your heart, not sort of as a protocol-driven thing. But if you're able to get a little bit of a conversation going about emotions and validate the emotions enough that the emotional dysregulation calms down, then you might be able to say, well, and so what are some of the pros and cons? Saying rational mind is not going to work too well, but what are the pros and cons? Pros and cons really pulls for rational. I'm pointing to my left frontal cortex. Really pulls for rational mind, which is located like here, and that can be helpful. And then you can use words like, so what is your conclusion? I'm hearing that you're really upset and maybe a little anxious, and I'm also hearing that you really would prefer, list the pros, even though you have these cons. What's your solution? Where are you landing? So that would be a way to really elicit some wisdom.
I
So
like that.
does that help?
Where are you landing?
Where are you landing? Yeah. What do you want?
Yeah.
Remembering that just because our loved one has borderline doesn't mean they don't have wisdom. Quite the contrary. Their wisdom is often going to be quite different than our wisdom. So sometimes the challenge is ours to understand their wisdom and to embrace it, and perhaps to point out where something might be lacking. But let's recognize not everybody has the same conclusion to the same problem.
Right. Super. All right, Doreen, did you have a question? I think Doreen had a question. Let's see.
I'm reading it now. Hold on just a second. Got lots of compliments. Marie Paul, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
And then one person was asking, considering that you're talking about modeling, did your daughter in this situation have DBT herself?
She does. She does. She has DBT, and as is often the case with people who have had DBT, there has been also other types of treatment. So the addiction has sort of taken a sort of a primary focus, and now we're working on other things. And I'm noticing she hasn't given me express permission to talk about these other things, so I won't bring them up. But DBT happened for her a while back, and she loves the skills and has forgotten some of them, but doesn't mind when I say, hey, but wouldn't this be a good time to practice this or that skill? So I'm lucky in that way.
And another person, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but it does say, in what ways is a DBT's wise mind often different? And I guess they're generalizing, but I'm thinking maybe someone who has been trained in DBT, for sure, it can be very different.
Actually, I think I think she is asking in what ways to generalize is a person with BPD, their wise mind often different, as a follow-up to what you were just saying.
Saying to you, maybe. Yeah.
Yes.
Not just because they have borderline, I can guarantee you sitting here that in the same circumstances, my wise mind, Doreen's wise mind, and Tina's wise mind will be different. The difference is that because I know Doreen and Tina, and we talk at times, and if their wise mind is different than mine, my default position is going to be, oh, curious, interesting. What can I learn from this, right? That's what we do as human beings when we work in teams, or when we know each other, or when we have friends. If we have a friend who thinks profoundly differently, we're going to sort of listen and say, hey, how come? Right? And learn from it. Whereas with people who have borderline, we've very often their experience is that they're being disregarded, or because they tend to, because their position, their wisdom tends to be quite different in many ways.
And I think everybody needs to remember that wise mind, looking at the logical part, correct me if I'm wrong, Marie Paul, getting to the logical part to even do that logical part, you have to be somewhat regulated, and that, these discussions about, listing the pros and cons can't happen when someone's really upset. That's where validation comes in first, to validate those emotions and feelings, to get them calm, to even help them through.
To even have a chance to get to more regulated pros and cons, rational mind thinking, which eventually gets you to wise mind. But what a lovely place to be as a parent, to be able to say, to have, so I'm making this up. Actually, I'm not making this up. This reminds me of Beth's son, who so wanted a cat. He just wanted a cat. He was after his mom to get a cat, right? So totally emotion mind, not dissimilar from my emotion mind, and about the dog. And then, so validating this and trying to do some pros and cons about this. How wonderful to then be able to say, so where do you get to? What's your conclusion? Now that you remember that true fact that his dad is allergic, and that, but you really so want a cat, what is your conclusion? What do you want to get to? And if his answer had been, I forget what happened, but if his answer had been, well, I'm going to convince the neighbors to get a cat, well, hey, why not? It's not an answer we might have come to, but that's okay, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, and I think that's, I think what happens is, I remember this instance when we were stopped at a red light and this beautiful motorcyclist came up with this really snazzy outfit, and my daughter was like, oh my gosh, like, I think I want to get my motorcycle license first. And so my husband and I jumped into like, do you know how dangerous they are? Do you know how much insurance costs? We went through this whole thing, and she just started crying because all she was just expressing an emotion. And so, certainly once we got things calm, we kind of said, well, what is it that attracts you to that? You can start asking questions, but before, we have to remember that feelings are very different than the facts, and so sometimes we have to go through that first.
So we're actually at time. We're a couple of minutes over.
Yeah.
Marie Paul, thank you so much. There's been great comments, as you can read in the Q&A, of how helpful this was. Everyone, we will be sending you a recording along with a link so you can review the slides. I know people had some questions and wanted the list, and they loved the graphic.
I will send you the list as well, Tina. I will send you both the slides and the list of practices, of mindfulness practices.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we hope to see you at a future Family Connections Alumni Institute event soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Nice seeing you. Bye, Tina. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.